We are confident that weapons were loaded onto that vessel, and I would bet my life on the accuracy of that assertion.
Hey guys, Tim here. Privyet and welcome to episode 2. Today we're going to be watching some videos of a little sneaky peeky. So if you know what that is, then you're going to enjoy this episode because we're going to be chatting to a military and defense journalist and talking some common sense stuff surrounding this issue. Hey guys, Tim here. Today we've got John Stupart from African Defense Review here. We're going to be talking about a little Russian boat that decided to come around to our shores. It's caused a lot of problems for South Africa in general, with recently the American ambassador to South Africa making claims that we were arming the Russians. The BBC has made claims that we loaded arms and ammunition onto the Admiral Gorbachev, which is also nonsense, but sometimes the media gets things a little bit twisted, and that's why we're here today. We're going to be just dispelling a few things, talking some logical, no-nonsense, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense stuff. So yeah, John, welcome to Guns Uncensored.
Thank you. Looking forward to this, yeah.
Yeah, so if we can start, if you can tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So I'm the director and co-founder of the African Defense Review. We've been doing defense research for 10 years actually. Now that I think about it, 10 years and a couple of months.
Yeah.
On and off. We were at some point writing and publishing publicly, but now we kind of more work kind of in this space, sort of dispelling myths and providing support for media organizations and defense expertise for other organizations, NGOs and the like. We find that it's kind of the niche that we're able to fill best in that kind of space. So yeah, I've been doing that for 10 years. In between that, I studied a master's in war studies at King's College in London. And before that, I actually was the deputy editor of an old magazine. Be interested if anyone actually knows. It's called the Africa Armed Forces Journal, which had been around since 1975. I had not been doing this since 1975. I joined in 2010. 2010. I'm going back into ancient history there. Which is kind of where I learned my beat, as it were, doing defense journalism, defense reporting, trade news, and that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So that's kind of where I cut my teeth, yeah. And then sort of down to where I am now, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I do remember that publication. So yeah, it's a very niche market that you guys are filling because it's quite thin on the ground when it comes to getting expert opinions on certain things. And for many years, no disrespect to Helmut Heitman, Helmut is a fantastic resource and a fantastic guy himself, and he provides very important insight into things. But it's nice to see a variety of different people that are interested in these kinds of things, and it makes things more interesting. So yeah, down to the meat and potatoes. We've got a Russian ship, and yeah, apparently a Russian ship came to South Africa, switched off its AIS system, covertly came into Simonstown, and we loaded tactical nuclear warheads onto her for the war in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, it's I should preface saying we had a Russian ship, and now I was kind of curious where the Lady R is now. I'm sorely tempted to actually shell out for the premium maritime trackers, if only just to see where it's off to now, which far-flung country, and what wonderful payloads is it loading up into its hold there, wherever it's going. It's definitely
the last check
nuts, actually.
The last check I checked through, she was coming through the Suez Canal, downwards,
coming south.
Yeah, coming south. Yeah, through the Gulf of Aden. Yeah.
Hey, maybe she's coming back.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. Then grab your cameras.
Simonstown Mafia, we're looking at you. You've already been really helpful. I think that's if we learn anything from this, it's basically you don't mess with the Simonstown citizenry because they pretty much as soon as that ship came even close, the cameras were out and they were watching that thing the whole time. And we've got, my inbox has been full of, unsolicited pictures of the ship at all stages, which has been very, very helpful. The only thing I would say is maybe Simonstown Mafia, please get some zoom lenses. If any of you are bird photographers in your part-time, as a hobby, maybe take that lens and take a photo of the next time the Lady R or something like, a strange vessel comes in.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
From a journalistic point of view, very, very helpful. Yeah.
The other thing I picked up is, I mean, nothing slips through Simonstown without anyone actually noticing. But also invest in quality binoculars. A lot of people,
yes,
the majority of the sources that I spoke to were either looking with their eyes or with dated binoculars, and they couldn't positively identify. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's dispel the first sort of myth that came in on my side anyway. And the moment people hear Russia, arms and ammunition, they think AK-47 and AK-47 rounds. And just as an important one, an AK-47 round is a 6.72 by 39. South Africa did use a 6.72 by 51. It's not the same ammunition.
7.62.
7.62. Sorry, yeah, 7.62 by 51. It's not the same ammunition, and they're not interchangeable. The Russians have been quite unique in their arms and ammunition development since the war. Their stuff can't readily be used by the West. So basically, the first consensus that the South African public came to, and probably a lot of people in the world were that came to, is because it's Russia. They squatted heavily in Russian, and so they did a Slav squat, and were like, it's AK-47s and it's AK-47 ammunition. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Throw in a bottle of vodka too while you're at it.
Yeah.
I mean, so well, that's there's two things that happened, right? There was what came off when it arrived and what came on. In terms of what came off, a lot of the questions were like, oh no, it must be Russian ammunition coming off, and then there was also, well, it must be Russian ammunition going on, which immediately raises the first problem with that. Why would we, if you reduce, forget the calibers, forget the types, say Russia's giving us beer and they're offloading beer, but like say it's like Windhoek Lager, and we're taking Windhoek Lager to feed our very thirsty troops, which is a legitimate reason for any ship to take port in Simonstown. Why would we then give them Windhoek Lager to put into the ship to take away?
Exactly.
That kind of and I must admit, I was guilty for the first couple of days. I was thinking, why? What kind of bullets would we give them? We have Pretoria Metal Pressings, PMP. They produce this ammunition, so it's not impossible that we would put these in pallets and send them to Russia. But on the other hand, and we could verify that, we had in fact offloaded a legitimate shipment from this ship for our own special forces, using sort of Russian style ammunition. So why would we trade like for like, or even similar for similar? So in that regard, I think it was very, I think it was a very kind of simplistic analysis at the start of it, kind of thinking, well, it must be an arms shipment, therefore it must be weapons and ammunition. Now, obviously, I think this was also, we were kind of led this way by the US Ambassador Brigity's, I hope I'm saying that right, Ambassador Brigity's comments, saying he would bet his life that there's been weapons and ammunition put on the ship. But I think, what a diplomat considers weapons and ammunition is not what a defense expert considers weapons and ammunition. Because there's, when I hear weapons and ammunition, I think assault rifles and shells and bullets and rounds and maybe primers and casings and blah, blah, blah. I think when a diplomat hears that, it's everything that could be seen in a Russian soldier's hands in the Ukraine war. And I think that's where, kind of we started to creep to after we kind of started thinking like in terms of just basic ammunition and arms. No,
absolutely. And I mean, so how I had it was that the order was, it was an order placed with Russia for AK-47 ammo and probably to the tune of about 10 million rounds, and I think you get about 1 million rounds in a container. That stuff was offloaded, probably went up to Sanad, and then from Sanad it went and ended up in Naboomspruit, which is close to the Mozambican border. And now people will say, but why didn't they just go to Durban? And what people need to realize is that this was a sanctioned ship, and Transnet probably cocked in their broeke when they saw a sanctioned ship wanting to come to them, and they said, absolutely not. This is not for us. Defence Force, you guys deal with it. In terms of what came off, it's well accepted by a lot of people that it was a special forces order, and people are going to ask, you may know the reason why would our special forces want Russian ammunition? What would they use it for?
Well, because it's cool. Yeah. No, I mean, yes, that, but also, I mean, so obviously the Recce's, for whatever reason, perhaps they just like the feel of Russian equipment in their hands. I'm not sure. I'm legitimately not sure why, but they tend to favor or use, not favor, but they use Russian assault rifles, RPG-7 launchers, and the like in their operations. So in northern Mozambique, where they're currently fighting IS-linked insurgents, there's widespread photos. It's no secret that the South African Special Forces are using these weapons. Now, the fact that they're using these weapons means obviously they're going to be running out of ammunition, consuming these things. And that's why, I've commented before saying that this wasn't probably even a once-off order, and this is probably part of a long-standing order that we have had with the Russian Federation for this ammunition. There's nothing about that that's particularly suspicious. It's not below board. It's not sneaky. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And to my mind, that makes perfect sense that, special operators in a combat zone are going to be needing ammunition, or even just for training. Even if they weren't even if they weren't in a war zone, they would actually still be requiring ammunition, because it's not like they're not, firing these rounds as a course of action. So I think that, in a nutshell, I think that's why we would be wanting a consignment like this. And I think, on that side, the offloading side, that makes perfect sense. More importantly, it correlates with what the defense minister said, where there was a 2019-2020 order, if I remember right, and the arms control records show this, where these were, like you said, I think it was 10 million rounds?
Roughly 10 million rounds,
give or take, had been ordered. Now, those who don't know the defense industry, it's not like Amazon. You don't just place an order for a couple of rockets and some bullets, and it arrives the next week in a box.
Exactly.
It takes years for this stuff to happen. And that's done consciously. Like, you order 3 or 4 years in advance when you anticipate a shortfall. And then that's how you get to that stage. So, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that, there's a lot to criticize the government for about here, but in this regard, I think in terms of the offloading, fine. I'm happy. I'd rather believe that than the alternative.
So some of the reasons that our guys would logically use AK-47s or Russian ammunition is that they're fighting against an insurgent that uses the stuff all the time, and special forces operates behind enemy lines mostly. A lot of the time in combat zones, they operate in small teams as well. They take everything that they need for the mission. I mean, some of these guys are carrying like 80% of their body weight on them. In the old days, you'll hear the guys talk about the Recce's doing a Gunston 500. I think that was a 500-kilometer march with all your equipment and everything to survive, to extract from a combat zone. So I mean, these guys carry everything they need. So for them, if they run out of ammunition, it's relatively easy, dangerous, but relatively easy to get from an enemy. Pick up a magazine from an enemy guy. You don't even need to take the rounds out. You just pop the magazine in, because everything's interchangeable. So it makes it a little bit easier in terms of that sort of stuff. The reason I also said that it's not AK-47 ammunition that we loaded on is that I've worked in the firearms industry for a long time, and if you want to get AK-47 ammo, and I'll put pictures up of it on the screen, it's usually got Chinese or Russian writing on it. We import all of that stuff, and yes, PMP on their website says they manufacture 7.62 by 39, but saying and doing is two different things. We haven't seen PMP ammunition in stocks for a long time. And in South Africa, the guys that are using it are the shooting and the sports shooting community. And we don't get it. We get our stuff from Russia and from China. I've got pictures of Chinese ammo It's not the best. It's a steel casing and probably corrosive primers and stuff like that. But I mean, it's an AK. You just shoot it, piss on it, and put it in the safe, and then it's ready for the next time to be done.
So I doubt the AK minds what kind of ammo it is really.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So AK-47s and ammo for that, not really. But I mean, as you've confirmed, and it looks like there was an order placed, and that was what delivered. A lot of containers, in witnesses that I've spoken to, and probably you've spoken to, have said there were quite a few containers that came off. So now we're going to talk about possibly what went on. And
See, that's where it gets interesting,
That's where
right?
it
Like
gets
once
interesting.
that's done, what goes on?
yeah, and a lot of people would have thought, and it's easy to come to that sort of conclusion, is that the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, is being fought. It's a heavy artillery fueled battle. Apparently, the Russians are shooting off 20,000 artillery shells per day. That's a rain of fire that you have to sit. That's not games. That's a lot of stuff, and it's heavy stuff too. So yeah, people would automatically think, okay, cool, Russian howitzers. We've got the G series cannons. It's probably 155 millimeter NATO shells that are being sent over. And what do you think about that?
I was just Googling to confirm here. Yeah, but I mean, so your average, the Russian D-20, which I know is an old artillery system, but the Russian caliber is 152 millimeter shells.
Yeah.
We produce 155 millimeter shells for our friends in NATO.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're not our friends anymore. I don't know. But we produce a completely different caliber. For those not initiated, you cannot simply just put those 3 millimeters. Size does make a difference in this case.
Yeah.
Those 3 millimeters does mean you cannot just take a 155 millimeter shell and put it in a 152 millimeter
Exactly.
artillery system and fire that round off. It doesn't work with that. And more to the point, those shells are made by Rheinmetall Denel Munitions, which is, despite the Denel in the name, is not actually a South African company. It's 51% owned by Germany, or by its German parent.
Yeah.
And as a result, it would be very, very strange for a German ammunition or heavy caliber ammunition factory and explosives manufacturer to be sending shipments on a Russian freighter to Russia to fight for Russia.
Exactly.
Far more likely that it would be selling those systems, or rather that ammunition and those rounds, to a European supplier, and then we don't ask questions about what happens, but at the end of that, probably those shells will find their way into Russian hands, but on the receiving end and not on the sending end.
Yeah, obviously from what they've captured, because they've very nicely captured one of the Estonian Mambas that we sold Mambas to Estonia. Yes. They captured a couple of them, and they're now sitting in a Russian museum. It's very nice. The Russians have got a Ukrainian war museum going on, which is fantastic.
Well, I mean, so by receiving it in my side, I mean in terms of the Russians will be receiving the artily coming down like this with the fuses on. From one of the varied Ukrainian artillery systems that they have, many of which are chambered for 155 millimeter and are perfectly compatible.
Yeah,
so I think so we've been getting a lot of tip-offs. It's always interesting with these kinds of stories. There's a lot of people who are like, it's definitely this, it's definitely that, and there was a lot of like, it's definitely propellant, it's definitely artillery shells and Rheinmetall Denel was actually named in some of these tip-offs, and I was thinking, but that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we don't know to a degree of certainty. Rheinmetall Denel may well have lost their goddamn minds and decided to start sending ammunition to Russia unsolicited, on the side. But that, to my mind, would be complete business suicide. So, not impossible, because again, we don't know for sure what this is. But I think we can, by process of elimination, kind of certainly rule out small arms, to a large degree of certainty, rule out artillery ammunition, propellant, and the like, simply because the people who make them wouldn't sell them. And the Denel side of things at PMP don't make them in enough quantity to last more than 2 hours of fight time at Bakhmut. So, I don't buy that. I don't think that's a credible theory, unless this was some sort of token ship. I can't. It seems there's so many leaps of the imagination that you need to make to get there to justify this kind of theory of sort of actual bang bang pew pew ammunition.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
in my head, I suppose.
And I mean, the Russians are notoriously famous for making weird stuff. I mean, like they've got a pistol, a semi-automatic pistol, but it's 19 by 18 or 19 by 21. It's not sorry, 9 by 18 or 9 by 21, not 9 by 19, which is the standard. They do use a 9 by 19, but I mean they've got some really weird stuff that they use, and it's designed like that purposefully. They pride themselves in manufacturing their own stuff, and they're very self-reliant. So yeah. So other things that it possibly could be, and I'm gonna play an audio clip for the viewers of an eyewitness of it. It's obviously been I've played with it a little bit to change the pitch and tone and stuff like that because I don't want the person to be identified. But what the person says is that what they saw came in through Simonstown was a flatbed truck with square wooden boxes on it. So would you send propellant in square wooden boxes over the sea?
You wouldn't send propellant over the sea, full stop. And that's,
Exactly.
I mean, my colleague Darren Williffe has, I've learned a lot about how to ship propellant in the past couple of days. But Darren Williffe specifically mentioned to me that it's the sheer conditions of shipping by sea means that the moisture, the salt, and all that kind of jazz is simply too severe that even in the best Connex box, would you not safely send propellant by ship that way? So no, and certainly not in the visual reports that you see of these boxes. They look almost like it's like flat packed wooden boxes or wooden crates, if you will, like you would see if anyone's watched an action movie where they have the arms deal go down. It's those kind of crates, maybe with a little fewer beams and more sort of solid structure, but definitely not something you'd be putting any kind of explosive material in unless you particularly wanted to have a explosion on board your ship or destroy or taint the chemicals or material that you have on board. So very different shipping containers that they were used. They're not even shipping containers. I just call them crates, really.
It's kind of like what you would pack your whole household into if you were going overseas. They don't even use containers. I think they put them into wooden boxes and that's it. So I don't know if that's what you received as well. That it was boxes that went on and not containers, because there was this thing that there were containers going on, and every single person I spoke to, and it was quite a few, said they saw boxes going on, wooden boxes.
Yeah, no, that seems to match up with what we're getting. We're getting quite a few photos and things indicating that this is the case. That there were no containers. Look, I think containers are pretty simple to see. They're pretty obvious. There's been a lot of video, and like you said, that the Simonstown Mafia they're prolific. They were watching that ship like hawks while it was docked in Simonstown. There were no shipping containers loaded onto that ship as far as anyone could see. However, we are starting to see these wooden crates, certainly coming into the base, or at least coming into Simonstown and being moved there, which then raises, or rather indicates perhaps what what this cargo may or may not have been. So that certainly correlates with what we're seeing. I'm not sure how many, to be honest. I'm not quite sure how many of these were loaded on, but given that the loading went on through the night, I'm inclined to believe quite a few. Perhaps there were reports that they were shipped on in containers inside and then unloaded, but it's really a case of, how many and in what quantity. Now, we don't know that for sure, but what we did see is the ship leaving port. And that ship was, if not heavier than when it left, it's certainly not lighter. And it pretty much looked about the same on its way out. So it didn't look like it was heavily laden with, say, I don't know, tanks or G6 artillery. I think even one G6 artillery system would probably lower that waterline quite a bit. So, I think when we saw that ship leaving port, It didn't have a heavy cargo on board, not unless it was full of wine corks, I suppose.
She certainly wasn't very heavy coming in and going out. I mean, I've seen, look, if we look at pictures, and I'll put that up on the screen as well. She's a container ship, and they get stacked. And I've seen pictures of her being stacked quite high up, like 2, 3, 4 containers high. There was nothing on deck, so that also indicates that it wasn't a lot of stuff that went in and out. So 10 containers will probably fill up the bottom, and whatever else went on. Yeah, and I mean, commenting on the boxes and stuff and not knowing what went on, a lot of people, because it was in the middle of the night and it was load shedding, a lot of people, they saw stuff coming down the main road, but then the moment it goes in through the gate, the main gate in Simonstown, it gets obscured by high walls and buildings, and you don't see it until it comes out from a building where the dry dock is, and then it disappears behind the ship again. So they couldn't see anything more than that. Yeah, so a lot of people couldn't see really what was going on. They couldn't give me numbers because it was dark and that sort of stuff. So here's another reminder: upgrade your binos and get a zoom lens. That's very important. And
these guys, the zoom lenses, 300 mils or more. Yeah. Please.
Yeah. Or just go to your CIA neighbor next door that was also watching the stuff, and ask if you can get a satellite view of things. I'm sure they'll help you out. No problem. that was just a joke. I was not saying that the CIA is in South Africa spying or anything like
that. Somewhere in Simonstown, a CIA spook is about to get the biggest fright of his life and be like, "Oh God, I got to leave. I'm compromised. Back to the safe house."
Yeah. So I mean, so now we've established that it wasn't arms and ammunition that went on. But in terms of the American thought and idea of things, pretty much it looks like anything that's used for war can be classified that way. So from your sort of research and what you've looked at, do you have a likely suspect of what you think it could be? I do as well. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts around that? What do you think it could be?
So back to about sort of Thursday, Friday, my initial thinking had been components of some sort. Given Russia's need for guidance chips, things like that to assist in the use. It's burning through its ballistic missile stock at a rate of knots. If it hasn't run dry soon, it's definitely on red or black status there soon. Drones, for example, there's a number of dual purpose or dual use things that these components could be used for. You could get a hell of a lot of them in not too many crates like that, and ship quite a few across. However, we've done quite a bit of digging now, especially over the weekend, and we've started to see, and it kind of correlates with I believe it was a 2022 question to Parliament by, I think it was good old John Steenhuisen, bless his socks, asking a number of pressing questions about foreign arms shipments. This is actually it was about 2 months before the Lady R even entered dock, so it couldn't have been timed better, to be honest.
It's almost like he knew to ask these things. That's the suspicious. Yeah, that's my suspicious side there.
Like a little birdie sort of landed on his shoulder and told him to ask this question.
Yeah.
Especially given that, outside of the DA's shadow defense minister, Cobus Murray, who is honestly probably the most informed person in the Ministry of Defense, full stop.
Yes.
I think even beyond the the rest of the DA, the rest of the government, there's quite a shall we say, expertise poverty there as relates to defense. So the question couldn't have been timed better, and the response by the Minister of the Presidency indicated that there had been an order to the tune of, it was just under 60 million rand, plus a couple of other things for observation/surveillance equipment.
Yeah.
Specifically mentioning the Argos. So I think it's specific. I can't remember what it said. It was either Argos or Argos surveillance, but Argos was specifically mentioned.
Argos observation. Now the Argos. I know exactly the one that questions that you're talking about.
So the Argos observation pod, or Argos 2 in this case, it's a little round observation pod that you'll see in the ends of drones helicopters, even on the ends of like sort of just static masks and things like that. You would have, anyone who's seen any attack, like if you look at your average attack helicopter, like an Apache or things like that,
Yeah.
they've all got these little surveillance pods at the front there. The Argos 2 is a particularly nifty one. It's got a very good suite of optics, thermal imaging and the like, and so on, and is used by a number of companies and a number of their systems.
Yeah.
Hensoldt is the manufacturer. Hensoldt South Africa specifically create them. Milcor is developing a armed combat aerial vehicle or drone that uses the Argos 2.
Yeah.
Paramount, if I remember correctly, has the Argos 2 mounted on their RLAC ISR or surveillance aircraft, probably on the armed variant as well, to be honest, than worry. This thing is pretty ubiquitous. So when I saw that, to my mind, that kind of made a lot of sense, because you could fit quite a few of those. And, given the weight of commercial shipping is when you put that in a freighter, it doesn't weigh as much comparatively to a lot of other things you could put in there.
Yeah.
They could pack quite well. They'll obviously be in their own sealed containers within those wooden crates, if we assume this is the case. And that, you could fit in there. Now 60 million, I think if we're looking at, say, maybe a couple million a pop, we're probably looking at about 10 to 20 of those systems, perhaps more. I'm not sure on the number.
Yeah.
So the imagination starts to run wild with that. That would fit Russia's need quite well. The use of drones in the Ukraine war is very well known. There you can see this. I'm just adjusting this a little bit. You can see the use of drones and armed drones throughout the Ukraine war on both sides. Quite, it's prevalent. And I think this system has a lot of uses for Russia. Now this is where it becomes a weapon. And I think that's where the US ambassador is not necessarily wrong when he says weapons and ammunition. Now, I mean, ammunition, I think that might have just been hyperbole if it's this thing. But the Argos pod could be utilized to spot Russian artillery, missile strikes, coordinate offensive operations, defensive operations, just provide eyes in the sky for a number of utilities, day and night, rain, wind, and shine.
Yeah.
That has a lot of value to it. It raises a lot of questions if this is the case. Hensoldt South Africa is owned, again, by a German company. I can't imagine a German company providing this to the Russians.
Yeah.
They're obviously not the only ones who have them now, because obviously they sell them commercially.
Yes.
There's a number of other companies that would have them, including Denel, including South African providers.
Yeah.
So it raises a lot of questions about that. I mean, I would certainly be asking the third party shipping company or the logistics company that was shipping this stuff. Well, where is your client Hensoldt South Africa? No. Okay. Well, now you're starting to eliminate the process down to maybe it was Denel, maybe it was Paramount. I don't think Paramount, to be honest, would be selling these separately like that, and certainly not to Russia.
Yeah.
Well, and certainly not in cooperation with South Africa. Paramount and South Africa don't really, to my knowledge, don't get on so well. So, there's a lot of questions that you then ask from that. But something like that kind of makes sense. It matches with the parliamentary question.
Yep.
It kind of all lays up. The only questions then arises.
2 hours later.
All right, so we're a little bit, we're back after load shedding, or the CIA or SSA decided to interrupt the connection. Who knows? It was probably load shedding, but you were busy wrapping up and saying and talking about that the Argos system being delivered was probably more than likely what happened, and it matches up with a lot of what we were talking about.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't want to get. I'm wary of getting sort of tunnel vision. In a different life, I used to work as a political risk analyst, and actually, in between the timeout time from Eskom's load shedding, I was thinking like, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Argos pod. We do make other things that are of similar shape and size that do reconnaissance and surveillance and fit into those boxes. It's not impossible. I think, Darren and I, for example, we were talking about, there was the CSIR developed something called the Meerkat system,
Yes.
which is like a long crane-handled observation system that's got similar capabilities, but is more static. We use it to pretty good effect for counter-poaching in the Kruger National Park. But as I understand, those were made in very small numbers and weren't quite like made to scale in terms of manufacturing, quite the same way that the Argos pod has. So it would be quite a bit of a shock if Hensoldt South Africa are the ones supplying the Argos 2, assuming it's the Argos 2. And, to my mind, you could be looking at someone like Denel or Armscor. There's certainly enough people in there, I think, left over from the Gupta days or even you don't necessarily need a Gupta related network in Denel to have this kind of like, well, we'll just sell these pods to the Russians because it seems like a good idea. I mean, I'm sure there's a more nuanced rationale.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, like we both said, it's all really hypothetical until we get some concrete information or evidence indicating just what on earth is going on. And honestly, the onus is kind of on the Americans, since they're the ones who actually started this whole kerfuffle with the accusation. The South African government had said that they were investigating. Yes, it's been 6 months. No, there's been zero progress. So it's going about as quickly as any other South African investigation. But it's the American ambassador who accused South Africa of supplying arms and ammunition. And thus the onus really is on America to provide this. Diplomatically speaking, anyway, I suppose. Practically speaking, it's probably not in the US to do anything, because ultimately it's in our interests, if we want to grow economically or even just prevent a recession this year, it's in our interests to kind of play ball with America.
Yeah.
We don't seem to have that kind of conception of reality in the government, and we seem to be inching closer and closer towards Russia, despite it having not zero, but minimal or negligible economic benefit to the country compared to America. Yeah. But I mean, I'm kind of encroaching on the whole international relations side of things here rather than defense side. But yeah, it's kind of a bad look all around.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, a little bit of things that I was looking at, and a few others were looking at, is that they posed some questions to the Defense Ministry, and they were referred to Armscor.
Armscor,
yeah, which is quite interesting. So, which either tells me that they don't really know what's going on or how it works. But yeah, we can only wait and see.
Yeah, that's interesting. If it's Armscor, then that could have perhaps Philip Dexter, the new chairman's, fingerprints on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
He was, the only thing I know about Philip Dexter is that he was selling hard at AAD last year in September, which, after having now just said in this podcast that arms deals take a while to happen, you could maybe rush things along in 2022 in September. Maybe, the Russians were there. Rosobor and Export were at AAD. It was that in itself was a bit disgusting that we'd actually have them there while they were actively fighting a war in Ukraine. But, we're non-partisan, blah, blah, blah. So that's fine. It's not fine, but it's fine. But it just, I don't know. There's a lot of things in the air there. Maybe Armscor does have some questions to answer.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for chatting to us about this. This is basically going to be a part 1. And part 2, I've got a special guest that's going to surprise us by coming on the show. That'll be a part 2. We'll probably get out in the next couple of days as well. We will talk about the geopolitical side of things and the political side of things, the ANC and how Russia and that sort of stuff works in. But yeah, no, thanks so much, John. It was really great having you on the show and having your insights into these things. Yeah. Do svidaniya.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, it's nice to talk about these things longer than a 5-minute soundbite for someone. So it's it's nice to kind of get down into the nitty-gritty about it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cool. So that was John Stewart, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in, and stay tuned for part 2.